All right. Well,
good afternoon, everybody. Hey, my name is Tim Cusick. I am the Training Peaks WKO5 product leader. Welcome to this afternoon or this evening's webinar, Advanced Running with Power. The best news you're going to hear all day is I'm not your host because I know little to nothing about running outside of some of the underlying principles. Steve Palladino there is. I'm going to turn off and go to mute and follow around in the backgrounds. I'll be ready to handle the questions. But I've asked Steve to introduce himself, get a little overview of the topic, share a screen, jump into his presentation and get going. So yeah, I'm going to shut it off. Good luck. And Steve, I'm turning it over to you.
Right on. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm just going to make one comment. Tim knows how to coach time trialing. That's for sure. And running is racing is quite similar to cycling time trialing in terms of demands and what you want. So let me start by sharing this screen here. What I'm going to do is start with some slides, and then we're going to go into my WKO. You'll see a few names. The athletes that I'm using have all consented previously to having their data shared publicly, and so you'll see a few names as we're scrolling through things. So let's get into it. First, a little bit about my background. You know, if you're on this webinar, it's probably because we broadcast it somehow, and you know a little bit about my background, but here it is. I'm a coach. I coach running exclusively. I have a few triathletes that I coach, but I coach their running. I don't coach the full triathlon. And I've been doing this coaching with power since Stride came on the scene. 2016 is when I started. But my background in power and training racing with power goes back personally quite far, back to 2002. That's when I first started training and racing with power, and followed the power movement in cycling for my own uses through for the last 20 years. So I've seen the evolution. I've been with WKO. I've used this as my analytic package since inception. I mean, back in the early days of WKO, I was on. Prior to all this power stuff, I was a runner in college, in high school, and even post-collegiate career, where I ran a 2:16 marathon. And I was an Olympic marathon trials qualifier in 1980. And then as I started getting into running injuries, I switched over to cycling, which is what got me to power, or introduced me to power. And in my cycling days, that was more as a master's athlete. I managed to have a few good results, including the 54:37 40K time trial. And then prior to all this coaching business, I had a more than 30-year career in medicine, where I did foot and ankle surgery and sports medicine, lower extremity biomechanics, which all fold nicely into understanding some of the underpinnings of coaching runners in a broad sense, and coaching with power in a more narrow sense. So there's a little bit of my background. Please type your questions in the question box as opposed to the chat box. People typically ask if this is going to be recorded, and yes, it's usually recorded. It will be recorded, and it's usually made a few days afterwards. I will make the views that I'm using today available. I'll put them up on the WKO Power Users Facebook group, and they will be made available. They are always a work in progress. So, you know, you'll get my most current version. But then I hope that my current version will be out of date in about 6 months. There's a little bit about the background. Now, what we're going to cover today is less about how to coach with run power. We're trying to keep this to an hour, and you know, that's too broad of a topic. And what I want to do is how WKO can facilitate a coach's ability to coach with run power. So I'm going to go into some of my thought processes and how I use WKO to make me a better coach, to allow my runners to become better runners. So that's the focus. And as I dwell on this, as I was creating the slide, I came back to this slide. Gabrielle created this particular conceptual drawing, but it explains how I see things and how many coaches see things. It's really about the process. We're going to test. We're going to monitor the athlete's execution of the plan that's generated from the testing. And then we're going to progress the plan. That's training load, et cetera, how we progress the plan, and then maintaining or monitoring the athlete's consistency, making sure that they're achieving what we're laying out for them, and we keep adding to these layers and get this spiral of growing fitness. So I'm not going so much into how I'm going to write this particular workout and what training intensity distribution I'm targeting. I'm not going to go into that, but I'm going more into the process management, how I use WKO to get this spiral to happen for my athletes. So in WKO, at least my WKO, I've got hundreds of charts. Some of them I don't even use anymore because I use them to discover relationships between power metrics, et cetera, and they serve their purpose and I don't use them anymore. But I've got hundreds of charts, but I don't go through hundreds of charts every week as I'm coaching athletes. I really am going to what are the go-to charts, the high frequency go-to charts. That's these. It's the tip of the iceberg. Then there is all this there's many other charts that I don't use frequently. I don't look at every time for every athlete, but there are set things that I look at every week, and sometimes every time I download athlete's data. There I go. See, I just said patient, and that's a remnants of my old doctoring days. Just as an aside, I'm going to go a little tangent. People ask me, do you miss doing the medicine thing? I go, well, I'm doing pretty much the same thing now with coaching. You diagnose, you assess the issue, you give a prescription, and then you see the patient back to see if they're progressing. Well, it's the same thing with coaching, except that in medicine, not every patient wants to get better. Some have ulterior motives to not get better. In athletics and running, everybody wants to get better. So it's the same process, so to speak. So sorry for that tangent. So again, there is this great part of the iceberg that is not seen regularly, but it's there, and it's important for a coach that's tying into the advanced coaching concept. It's important for the coach to understand all of this. What are the physiologic underpinnings that go into interpreting some of these charts and some of these metrics? understanding how the models work. You know, if you just are reliant on here's the output and I'm going to believe the output no matter what, you're missing things potentially. You got to understand how the models work, what their limitations are. All models are wrong, but some are useful. So you need to know your model, or models in this case. You need to know when a deeper dive is needed, and then know that you have those resources for doing that deeper dive. And you got to know what WKO can and cannot do. I mean, as much as we're progressing in WKO to do predictive, prescriptive components, it's not all there yet. So you have to learn what the limitations are, and how to evolve, but also realize that the beauty of WKO is if you can think about it, you can usually build it. And so keep thinking, look at this big picture. You may not use everything all the time. This is what we're going to talk about. So, but you need to know all of these things, the underpinnings, how the models work, when the deeper dive is going to be needed. So let's go more and try to keep it more into this area. What I look at frequently in WKO. And really it's three things on typically three things that I'm going to every time I'm looking at athletes' data. And you know, I do this, I look at athletes' data several times a week, but particularly every weekend, I spend you know a good 6 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday, just going over stuff. And this is what I look at, these three things. Did the training session get executed as prescribed? And a corollary to that, was my prescription, did it reasonably achieve the desired stimulus? And I'll explain that as we get into WKO. So I start at the workout level, and I look at workouts executed as prescribed, and did my prescriptions deliver the goods as far as the desired stimulus? So that's one. Then I will look at training load parameters. Did the training load, is the training load in the target area for what I'm looking at? Does it match my expectations? And then did the athlete progress at all? How are the KPIs moving? And in particular, when I say KPI, I'm looking at power duration broadly, and then there's some specific KPIs that I look at as well. So was it workout executed? How did it impact the training load? And is it my training load meeting expectations? And then did the meter move at all? Did the meter move at all in terms of power duration or KPI? What changed? And then there's the fourth one, which I occasionally do, is if there's racing, then I want to evaluate a race. Was a race effective, executed effectively? Did it meet expectations of the athlete and myself in terms of what I expected in terms of, or estimated in terms of potential outcomes? So primarily three main elements, and occasionally this fourth one, which is looking at races. So those are the questions that I ask on a regular basis, and that shapes what I look at frequently. I'm looking at a workout with just a couple of different charts and reports. I'm looking at training load. I have a lot of different training load. We'll go into that. A lot of different training load charts and reports that I look at because I really want to see how these different training load metrics intermingle, how they mesh together. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I look at how the athlete progressed. Have they progressed? And of course, if you're coaching athletes, you're not going to see movements on a weekly basis. Sometimes you have to step back and look a little bit, over a period of weeks or months. But I always check every week. Did anything change? Did things move? All right. So I did not want to go into the deeper dive, but I just am going to have this one slide here. When you ask those three questions, was the workout, did it do what you expected? Was it executed properly? How were the training load metrics responding? And how did the KPIs respond? If not, then why did things not turn out as you expected? And that's when you start doing the deeper dive. So some of the things that I will off the top of my head look at was if the person didn't hit target powers in a training session, was it a technical glitch? As we know, with running power, particularly with stride error power, it can be, depending on the shoe, depending on position, et cetera. So I always check what did air power, was it reported erroneously if the person's not meeting targets. I've seen it where an athlete typically has, say, 1%, 2% air power, and then they have an interval session where every interval was like 1% less than what I expected. Well, I know in those situations that the athlete, in terms of effectiveness, they did what I wanted. It's just that the data had a technical error to it. So the other thing that I'll look for, is there an environmental reason for what you just saw not falling into expectations? There'll be days where I'll have an interval prescription and it's based on CP or CP and reserve work capacity data that's generating cooler temperatures, and all of a sudden it's a hotter day. And most of my athletes that I coach one-on-one, they're instructed to adjust the targets, but sometimes they'll be close enough that they don't adjust, but I'll look at the power and it's a little bit lower than expectation. Well, that's explained by these environmental factors. So I do this deep dive to help explain. Sometimes it's athlete issues that's not captured in the metrics. Now, some coaches will track things like HRV, and they'll track sleep, RPE. They'll draw all this in from Training Peaks and have that additional bit of metrics. But for me, communication is a big thing. I encourage all my athletes to use in Final Surge, use the icons for how the workout felt in terms of effort level, their RPE, whether they're having a niggle that's bothering them. So communication is perhaps the most important bond between the coach and the athlete that helps explain sometimes when things didn't work out. So if I can't find a technical or environmental issue, then it's really, I go, let's start talking. And then lastly, I'll look at maybe my prescription was wrong. And so all of these things are part of the deeper dive. So let's get into these, looking at these three common things here. Again, I'm not going to do so much of the deeper dive stuff, but let's look at some of these more common things here in WKO. So I'm going to switch screens right now. And let's go to new share. And we're going to go to here. Share that screen. All right, so let's go into a few things. I said that the first thing I do is I start off with workouts, and I'll look at every single workout. For example, I'll look at an easy workout. Was it less than 80%? Do I have an athlete that's sneaking over 80% on an easy day? I like easy workouts that have a ceiling to it and are easy aerobic runs. So I look at that, and I'll scan every one to see if training targets were met. And if not, then I start doing the deeper dive stuff. This is a CP test. And if you refer back or remember Gabrielle's diagram, testing is part of this process. I mean, and this is important as a coach. If you're using WKO, power duration curve is dependent on testing. Your training load metrics, how valid they are depending on how valid the CP and reserve work capacity and percentages CP, all these different factors are ultimately have an upline common theme that they require testing of the power duration curve. If that's done, if it's done frequent enough, then you're going to get valid estimates. I use CP tests a lot. I also supplement testing with targeted testing. We'll get into that with some of the training load stuff. But I will use CP testing a lot. And the reason is that I get an instant snapshot of CP and reserve work capacity. And when I'm speaking here, CP and FTP are essentially the same thing. Conceptually, they are the same thing. When Dr. Coggin gave a lecture to USA cycling coaches and wrote a chapter in their manual back in 2003, one of the methods he used for identifying functional threshold power was CP testing. They are conceptually the same thing. So if I use CP or I use FTP as I'm talking, take it to mean the same thing. I use this as an instant snapshot. It's also gives me very environmentally specific, whether it's at altitude or a certain heat and humidity. It gives me a very specific, environmentally specific CP and RWC estimate, it can be done in one day and have it all done. So anyway, let's just go into analyzing this particular CP test really briefly. I look at it, and one of the things I'll look, was it executed properly? And I like to see I'm highlighting this, and I like to see how much or what the duration of that selection here. This is a little on the short side in terms of the amount of duration. So that could impair this particular portion of the test. I also will look at air power. So here's the two segments that I selected from the test, and we can see that air power was 3%, which is reasonable. So from the perspective of air power, this is a reasonable test. From the perspective of this little segment right here, yeah, a little bit lacking in terms of duration. Should be a little bit further gap. Let me just orient you to this particular view. I have, this is where I do most of my work, is right here, run summary dashboard. It has the run power, the highlight view, and then it has zoom and overlap chart in case you might want to look, and then it has a report. The top part of the report, say from about here to down here where air power is, that is the stuff that I look at pretty much every workout. Is, you know, the average power percent of FTP, the pace, running effectiveness, various running dynamics metrics, and air power. But this report goes on and on. It goes on and on because all these other things allow for deeper dive, which I will do on occasion. I'm not going to go into it right now. The view also has this. It's a segment selection dashboard. It allows me to better select segments. So here I selected. I'm going to zoom in, and allows me to select that particular segment and then save it in this case. All right. And then it gives you a little bit of data about the selection down below. So that's what I use this part for, is just doing manual selections. I do manual selections for CP tests in some race situations, but for most part, if an athlete has laps present, I just use the laps for their intervals. Sometimes the laps get screwed up and I have to manually select. So again, that's why I have that particular dashboard there. I have supplemental charts, which I will go to in just a moment. And then I have this one, which I use quite a bit. I don't use this chart. It's FRC and VO2 modeling. It's dynamic modeling of those. I've done a number of videos that go explain the particulars of this dashboard, and those are on YouTube, and you can certainly find them there. They're in the training and racing with Run Power playlist that I have on YouTube. So let's go back to looking at both of or the entire workout here. An entire workout, we're going to see. The thing I'll look for in a CP test is I'm looking to see, was there enough recovery time to allow for reserve work capacity to come back up to 100% reconstituted. And this is close enough. I said he was short, only 11 minutes. I like to see 30 minutes, but on the other side of that coin is that his reserve work capacity did manage to come back up pretty well. You can see that he overreached the mid point right here. This is 100% of VO2 max coming from below and 0 kilojoules of reserve work capacity. You can see he overshot here. That means that either for this chart, either FTP or FRC are underestimated. So that's why I have this chart down here, is allows you to override those values. So let me demonstrate. If I come down to this chart, I can actually manually input. Now, I'm just going to, in this situation, I come to Dfrc, and the outcome of this athlete's CP test was 11.7 kilojoules was the RWC estimate, and 340.7 was the CP estimate. And I have to put it in one more place here, 11.7 and 340.7. One thing about this one, when you're overriding, see this one here, the y-axis label is kilojoules. This one's percent. The software always will label the y-axis with kilojoules. I just have to change it back to percent. So as I close that, now we see, as opposed to based on FRC and FTP setting at the time, this is how that test looks from the standpoint of his actual outcome metrics. And you can see that right here in the 3-minute test, he pretty much came to 97%. You look up there at the legend, you'll see percent FRC used, 97% used. So pretty good there. This one here, maybe it could have gotten a little bit lower to have a perfect values here. But basically, that's how I use this chart, is when I override FRC with RWC from a CP test. One other thing in using these charts, notice that I hide those two things in the legend. See that this little line is percent of FRC used, and the red is exponentially weighted moving average of power. By having those lines there, just makes the chart look messy. So I'm just hiding both of those. Now the chart looks cleaner because those lines are gone, but you can still see as I scroll, if you look up in the legend, those values are being recorded. All right, next, let's look at some other uses of charts here. I'm going to scroll to January 19th for Ben. This workout was 6 times 15-second hill sprint, maximal hill sprint. Well, I'm looking at this, and all of these run summary report information. That's all based on average power and percent of FTP, et cetera. I want to look not at the average power. If I'm looking at this over time, I want to look at max power. So I've got a supplemental report here in the supplemental charts, and that's where I'll go to for things like hill sprints, where it's a max power effort, really short, punchy effort. And that's how I evaluate. And I'm really looking at peak power in this situation. So again, these are charts that I will use as a go-to, but in specific situations. In this case, max power, and looking at this pretty nice series, all over 500, which is really nice, and they're all up there in the 150% of FTP or CP. All right, so let's go to let's get rid of that particular report. I'm just going to hide it after I maximized it, and let's look at an interval session. All right, so let's just look at yesterday. Again, for this workout, I usually will copy and paste the prescription from Final Surge into the details, the title, and sometimes even some of the detailed workout specifics in terms of recoveries, et cetera. So this is 2 times 7, 2 times 5, 1 times 3. In old days, you'd call this a cut down because you're referring to faster and faster pace, but this is a power progressive mixed intensity interval workout. So a couple of them that are near threshold, a couple of them are super threshold, and one that is approaching power at VO2 max. So again, I will, here's the laps. They're already, I'm just using the laps that came from the watch. I'm not going to select into more detail. And so first thing I'm doing is, did the athlete hit targets? 336, 336, that's the bottom of the range, which is certainly okay because this is the first interval workout this athlete has done in a while. He had more of a base prep period that he's coming off of. And then 349, hit the bottom of that one, then a little light on that one. And then this one, 359, was certainly in the target range here. So that's a pretty nice workout, hitting the targets that I wanted. So I look at that, and I'll look at those these parameters a little bit, but I'll go straight to this one. Now, one thing I failed to mention, now to best use this particular dashboard, I want to condense this session here to just that. So I'll select that, which I've already previously done. That's this component. So you can see it outlined here. So I'm just selecting that. And the reason for that is to allow for me to see some of these percentage of the session type of metrics actually mean something, as opposed to if I use the whole workout, just demonstrate. If I use the whole workout, only 24% of the workout duration was at plus 90%. But no, I really want to evaluate that session. And so, there you can see 48% was at 90% or more. So again, this same athlete, this is the one where I override the FRC and FTP with the CP test data, and you can see that here he's near threshold, and he shouldn't really be driving his RWC down. But once we get super threshold, he starts driving it down. This one was the light one, remember? So again, it doesn't push it down as far. And then this one drove it down. But you can see that just looking at RWC, I can squeeze more out of this workout. So that's what I'm trying to say is did it get the desired stimulus? He hit all the targets, but basically, maybe not the stimulus I really wanted. So looking at this is going to allow me to tweak that workout just a little bit. You can see that he didn't really approach power at VO2 max completely here. And as I scroll through this, he had 2 minutes at 95% of power VO2 max, 19 minutes, and it translated to these percentages. I also have this chart in here that allows you to get a visual where it breaks into bins these percentages a little bit. So you can see, he got stimulus up here that's close, but we can certainly squeeze these bars down a little bit more and get a little bit more out of this workout. Again, this is the first one coming off of more hill sprints and tempo and base work. So I'm okay with this, but I'm also understand that I've got room to grow this workout. All right, so let's look at another athlete, because again, this is one where I go, yeah, we can squeeze a little bit more. I didn't get the stimulus out of this workout that I can when he's hitting on all cylinders. So let me switch to another athlete. I'll switch to John, and we're going to go to this workout right here. What this one was is 3 times 5 minutes super threshold, and these targets are based on both CP and RWC. They're individualized for him, and then 3 times 3 minutes at max aerobic power, quote unquote. And these again are individualized based on CP and RWC. So it's 3 times 5, and then a 4-minute recovery in between sets, and then 3 times 3. And I look at targets, and the targets, I won't go into it. The targets were hit pretty well. Now I want to see, did my workout do what it's supposed to do? Again, look here, his FRC is being modeled a little bit on the low side, and his FRC our reserve work capacity from his testing was a little bit higher. So I'm going to come in here and just update. This is 11.4, and this one is 285.2. And that same thing, 11.4 and 285.2. I'm just overriding things again. I'm going to switch this back to percent. All right. And now we can see that workout again. I've already selected the session, which you can see down here. I've already selected the session to analyze that session. And you can see that, okay, super threshold, he was driving reserve work capacity down a little bit, but then when we got closer to the power VO2 max, a higher intensity, of course, it's driving reserve work capacity down at a more rapid rate and not fully recovering, so we're driving it down sequentially. Then the power at VO2 max or relative to 100%, you can see we're getting some pretty good numbers. Let's look at this report. Yeah, it's still working. I'm not going to spend time on it, but you can see just down from here, he's getting a significant time that's close to 100% of power VO2 max. Significant time at 95% or greater. And again, this goes into the bins, and you can see this is what the workout is about. We have this bunch of work that's being done that's going to generate sometime over 90% to 95% roughly, and then that's the 3x3 component that drives it up in touches on these higher. These are, by the way, these are duration bins as you look over there. All right, so basically, as opposed to Ben's training session, where we didn't get quite as much time close to VO2 max, and we didn't drive our WC down as much, this session is a lot better. So I'm not gonna, where can I eke out a little bit more in this? I could shorten the recoveries down and drive this down a little bit more. So I could shorten this recovery, shorten this recovery, and drive that end point down a little bit more. Or depending on his fatigue resistance, I could add another one of these here. There's a lot of different ways of modifying it, and I said I wouldn't get into the how to coaches run with power, but I just did a little bit. Let's go into another one. And this one here, I'm just gonna, again, I said there's three things. The other thing I'll look at is I look at race. So I'm gonna go to Nicole and look at her California International Marathon. She ran a PR on that day. And we're going a little bit slow here, but let's go into this. This is one additional chart that I like to look at. And this half index report. Basically, I'll use this for racing. Besides looking at the power file and the resultant data, which it's working on right now, I will use this particular supplemental chart here, which splits. It gives me my first half, second half, which is very helpful in analyzing running races. And of course, I look at the power split. This is what she ran at +2%. And I look at these other indicators of fatigue. And ground contact time got actually better, shorter ground contact time. So she nailed this race. 2% plus 2%, anything more than that, then I would say, hey, you left some power and time on the table. So I'll use that particular report for analyzing races. Next thing that I do is I will go to, after analyzing workouts, I'm going to go to training load, and this is the athlete view that I have, and it has a duration-based metric pack, the training load, which I'm going to go into, and a few others that I'm working on. There's a few more dashboards that I want to develop for this view, like race power planning, interval target planning, the middle section. You can see I have left side and right side of the power duration curve. I want to get the middle section, which includes VO2. So the sweet spot of the power duration curve, so to speak, or middle section. So there's a few more dashboards I'm working on, but let's get into this. So my training load dashboard has a lot of different charts in it, and because training load has to be looked at not just in terms of the traditional CTL, ATL, TSB, et cetera, as I have here, very valuable, particularly when I get to taper, very valuable. But I want to know, how am I ramping that athlete? Are they in a healthy ramp rate? I like to I'll look at this, but this is where my eyes go to first, is what's ramp rate. Now this is the CIM. Let's look at her ramp rate more recently. You can see she had a recovery, and then we ramped her back. She's getting back into a positive ramp rate, a little tendonitis through some training errors. But let's go back to CIM. So I'll look at the ramp rate to make sure I'm not progressing them too rapidly. And then there's other things, ATL, CTL ratio can give you a little insight in terms of are you ramping too much? Are you in the sweet spot as far as progressing their training load? I like this particular chart. We know that what's missing from this is really, when I'm pointing at the traditional PMC, what's missing is really the details on composition. And so that's what a lot of these other charts. This one here looks at, it's applying the same training load algorithm to the volume of work done at greater than 95%. That's the blue line. Same training load to things that are done over 103%, I believe. I don't want to expand this chart right now, but I can see how that is. All the blue dots are races, by the way, which is something I tag. If you're familiar with it, I will come in here and tag things. So I always will tag race, as you see here. So it's drawn in as a blue dot over here on some of these. I'm looking at the percentage of CTL on a given day. There's marathon, there's a long run. Recovery days are less than 100%. My requirement for an easy day is that it's less than 100% of their CTL, and it's 80% or less in terms of relative to their CP/FTP. This gives some composition by Palladino Power Project zones. This also does that as you get into here, percent of work being done. And then I also even have it into 3-zone system. The way I construct 3-zone system by power and duration in zone is I use 95% and above for the top zone and 80% and below for the bottom zone. Tim has discussed this particular. This is using WKO's chronic and acute training impact score and applying it to that training load with a training load algorithm model with a 42-day time constant here. That's the solid lines, and the 7-day time constant is the dotted lines. And we can see during her CIM build that progressed quite nicely, just as up here in this particular, that her chronic load at greater than equal 95% progressed quite nicely during her build. And there's a couple of other ones. This one I use for tapers. I plan out people's A-raise tapers. Can't go into that today because of time limitations. So there's a little bit of what I look for in the training load, not just this, which is very important, particularly looking at patterns, particularly looking at year over year, looking at longer periods. But I also look at how am I ramping the athlete? Am I in a healthy ramp rate? How is the composition looking? Are they progressing in the composition? How is the training intensity distribution from a couple of different perspectives? So I like to have that view, looking at all of these to really get a general impression of how I'm progressing that load, that one leg of Gabrielle's diagram. Then I look at, of course, I'm looking at the power duration curve. If I'm looking at really looking in detail at week over week, I will look at this particular chart here, which is a chart that gives me the power duration curve, the MMP curve, and all the pertinent metrics from last week, and then what it is as of the end of this week, as of right now. And so I can quickly glance at that and see if those metrics have changed. There are a number of charts in here that I glance at occasionally, like this one here for if I'm planning on doing a supplemental test. For example, this one here, she needs about a 3-minute test, 2 minute and 45 seconds test, based on this particular informal testing. So I will look at that. I'll occasionally glance at some of these KPIs, and I really need to expand this out, but this is using some of the stride metrics here. And if you notice, I have triple constrained. So this is constrained running effectiveness, and some of these others, they're going to vary depending on grade, on speed, and other factors. So this is triple constrained, and it gives me a very look at very constrained metrics. And we can see that during CIM, her running effectiveness had a really nice progression. There's other charts of the same stuff, but not constrained. This is not constrained at all. This one's constrained only to relative intensity. So I will check those particular metrics as well. I'm just going to give you one more little, I'm going to try to slide this here, I hope. Well, let's do it this way. I'm going to switch to my whiteboard, and I'm just going to give you one more little look here. And I have I'm working on this, and I will have it out at some point, but basically it takes FTP and FRC. It also takes, it allows for manual override, and it will give you, and hopefully my computer will show something here. Let's do this. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not. Maybe if I switch athletes here. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm sorry that it's taken me long. I should have cleared cache and so forth. But basically, I'm working on where it generates not only your power targets but progressions on interval duration, recovery, number of reps, et cetera. It gives that whole thing in a particular dashboard. And I really apologize. Well, yeah, I really apologize for that. So there you have it. You have sort of a overview. I'm going to go back and get to my slides really quick. And what I looked to in helping me achieve this process management of looking at a session, making sure that it's been executed properly, looking at training load and power duration and other KPIs to determine how I'm progressing, making sure the athlete's consistent, so we're assessing this and achieving this upward spiral of fitness. So I want to thank you, and maybe we can open it up for questions, Tim.
Yeah, great presentation, Steve. I was going to save you there. The reality of broadcasting to Zoom and then loading something with a ton of charts can really exhaust your video card. Zoom itself, and it happens to me in some presentations, you'll see it. It's just more than the video card can handle.
Well, hey, Tim, how about we do another seminar or webinar specifically on interval power target when those things are ready for prime time?
Yeah, we do need to do another webinar on all of the kind of all those little elements. I think that's two different questions, actually. I think we do have some new stuff coming and some things that we're working on, but specifically, what are you looking for?
Well, I think once I built those particular charts, and we can review some of the logic behind it and what users can use with those charts.
Absolutely, and you know, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So maybe I heard it wrong. That's why I'm hesitating to say anything. You're talking on the set that you're working on now?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we'd love to be able to kind of probably best. One of the things I think we need to do overall in WKO, we've done a good job of allowing user charts, right? And we have a lot of user creative metrics and analytics, but it has made things a little messy. So part of what I'd like to do in the next couple of months is go through like key user charts like yours and some other people's and clean them up, or bring out like one thing you said, Steve, that's so interesting about WKO, and I do the same. And I always get caught up in it because somebody will watch a webinar I did like a year ago and be like, well, where's that chart? And then I can't really find it because I've already moved on, right? That one chart eventually led me to create a new idea or a new chart, and I'm using that new idea. Then I have to go back and be like, hey, where was that? Where do I find it?
What was the name of that?
You know, it happens all the time, right? And that's the nature of analytics and your spiral. The reality is you begin, it's not just coaching the athlete. Oftentimes you kind of evolve in as you use the data and what you're looking at, same core, but there's an evolution. So I think what's happened is we've left some clutter too, as we've all evolved a little bit in that. And I think we just need to clean everything out and get to some kind of focused and specifics. Your stuff, there's a couple other key players. I'd love to be able to go through that process and announce to the group. So that is absolutely a goal. Is that a reasonable answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we're just so busy. It's so funny, you know, it's a strange world. You and I were talking about it getting on here, right? With coaching and sports and pandemic and all the things. Hopefully 2022 gets back to normal and we can just start steaming forward back on producing kind of the standard flow of information.
Yes, yes.
I can just tell you it's been a challenge for me and probably for most coaches listening to this. My time constraints are huge. So it's hard to find the time.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into some questions. I'll facilitate. I'll ask the question, you answer it, because you're the expert here. Some of these I know I've seen some notes already have been answered, but I'll try to get it right. So here we go. New to using WKO for running. I see charts for form power, ground contact time, stride length. Are any of these or other charts able to help predict if an athlete may be becoming prone to injury?
I would say on those particular charts, no. But if you wanted to really have a go-to chart, you want to look at your ramp rate. You want to look at your training load metrics. I mean, in running overuse injuries, overuse injuries are caused by training errors. So if you're looking at your training load, making sure you're progressing it properly. If you're looking at individual workouts, like for example, easy runs, are they less than 100% CTL? Are they less than 80%? Or is the athlete sneaking them up and running a little bit too much, too hard on easy days? So there's ways of ascertaining injury risk, ATL, CTL ratio, that at that level. But looking at a specific ground contact time and so forth, less so. Maybe in the future, there's an algorithm that calls for those or brings those in. But right now, realize that running overuse injuries are caused by training errors. Look at training load metrics. Look at how the easy run is being done, how the progressions are happening, the ramp rate, et cetera. All the other things, like biomechanics, strength and mobility, all these various anatomic parameters and shoes even, they just change the threshold at which injuries happen. But the injury is caused by the training error. That's the cause. If someone was in training and they could have the same anatomic factors, they're not getting injured. The anatomic factors and those sort of things just change the threshold. That's all.
Steve, I wasn't going to add much, but it's so funny. This first question touched on something I'm working out on outside of endurance sports and analytics. So here's an idea for you, because I don't have the time to do it. So if anybody listening now, I'm going to give you an interesting idea, just a thought, and how these spirals and learning kind of starts. We have quadrant analysis. I bet you everybody here who has no cycling understands quadrant analysis, where we look at let's call it cadence versus power. It's more, we can be more specific than that, but that's a good start. If you build a quadrant analysis on CTL and ramp rate, just did a scatter chart of that data, plotted an average and made it a quadrant, you might be surprised how much you learn that there's a relationship between high CTL, high ramp rate, and injury. There's a relationship between low CTL, high ramp rate, and injury, and the rest of the areas, which sort of will form a bell curve in your quadrant analysis, have a low indication of injury. And that really goes to what Steve is saying. It really is not only it's load and onset of load, how quickly we're increasing training load into the program has a really good impact. If you do it as a quadrant analysis and you had some way to track back, and I've done this with large teams, professional, other, team sport teams, there is a very interesting relationship in the top left-hand corner and top right-hand corner of that type of analytic and injury. So controlling the combination of total training load and then ramp rate from that load is very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add one additional point that everybody who's a coach here will nod their head. If you remember Gabrielle's diagram, there's that spiral going up and consistency is part of it. Well, the prime objective of a coach is to find that sweet spot between keeping them, an athlete from getting injured, keeping them healthy so they can maintain that consistency, and also having a stimulus that's going to drive adaptations, and finding that sweet spot, finding the happy spot. And I think what you just touched on is a stride in that direction for sure.
Yeah, so we just gave everybody homework. Hurry up, post for ask William Renfro to write that for us. No, it's actually a pretty easy chart to develop if you think about it. So there's some homework for everybody. All right, next question. The rest between 3-minute and 12-minute tests was indeed over 30 minutes. Oh, I see. It was somebody commenting on a comment. That's not a question. Next question. A run FTP variable exists in addition to WKO's own model FTP. When will run FRC variable exist?
I hope soon, Tim. I think that for at least for my purposes, being able to have a user field for run RWC it enhances another way of looking at both CP, FTP, and reserve work capacity / FRC. Allows a manual override of that so someone knows what they're doing. And I think the other thing that I'm not sure, behind the scenes how hard it is. Another thing that might be helpful, and I know this is a pain in your ass, is with running power, the weight entry is very important. And you could have a multi-sport athlete that wants to keep their real weight for their cycling power, but wants to keep a static weight for their run power. And right now the workaround is create 2 different athletes in WKO. I'm not sure if it's possible, but if you could have that where there's a run weight, cycling weight, and then that's incorporated into expressions. I don't know, but I'm just thinking out loud here.
It is just to answer the question, it's more challenging than it would seem on the surface, because here's the thing that people miss, and this is just kind of like one of those bad timing things. And for anybody who knows me, I'm always just much more open and honest about things. When we designed this WKO platform, we shifted away from reportings and we went to an analytics engine and said, we want people to be able to do all this great stuff like you and are doing, but running power wasn't a thing when we established the platform, right? And therefore, we hadn't really anticipated it as well. We had actually anticipated it some, that it was a possibility, but until somebody does it, you don't know the variables that running with power would need, like a more static approach towards weight, a more dynamic approach towards data model manipulation. So we didn't have those elements built in because, in simple terms, we didn't see that need coming. The problem is now we're entrenched in a certain way. We can bolt on little fixes, but that becomes problematic too. I can tell you what we're trying to do. And this is where I'm about to say this and Kevin's going to roll over in his work desk right now. We're trying to just make it so that, yes, we're going to take this whole idea of vibrant variables and expressions, and we're also going to give you the ability to enter your own metrics. So you could do whatever. You'd have to define it sort of like a developer field, but then you could just do it, which means we put the control back in your hands. And that stays within the metaphor of the way that the analytics work within the system. Our fear of doing that is it's going to become the wild, wild west of mistakes. And that's whenever you build something, it's like training, right? There's always cost benefit, right? There's always a consequence to something. So there's a little insight no one thought they would get today, but we're trying to find a smooth way to do it. The end goal would be to take your numbers, quantify, get them in, build the expressions. I will tell everybody right now, we're about to put out a release that probably next week that empowers everything I just said, but we had to make a bunch of changes under the hood, and it's been a little slower to do it, just life and
Yeah.
staff and team and everything like that has been challenging. But we'll put that out, and that should set the stage for us to get to things we wanted to get to this fall, this spring.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish we had a better answer. It's just been that kind of year. It's just been a dog for us to get things.
For everyone. For everyone.
Yeah. Just is what it is.
Look, every company. Every company.
Yep. All right. Next question. You mentioned got room to grow this workout. I should have interrupted you here. How would you keep track of that? And how and when do you adjust the plan to grow the workout?
That's a pretty that's a cool question, and I should add that when I'm coaching one-on-one, I don't create a plan, a specific plan months out, even 2 weeks out. I have a plan here or penciled out how I want to go, but life happens. You got to adapt. So my plans are week by week. And so, for example, in that particular workout, maybe the next time that athlete runs that workout is a week or two from now. Mental note to self, hey, we can tweak some of those recoveries. When you're dealing with intervals, you can manipulate work intensity, work duration, recovery intensity, recovery duration, number of reps, a few other variables, but those are the primary ones you manipulate. So you see something, you go, okay, how next time I run this workout for this athlete, which may not be for 2 weeks, it may not be on any calendar or anybody's plan, it may be just here, maybe a little pencil scratch. I'm manipulating some of those variables. And then I analyze, did it happen? I think that as you get into individualized interval power targets, the coach is going to get closer to the mark first time and not have to manipulate. But still, you always are going to want to read it, analyze it, and adapt it, possibly adapt it if you need to.
That's a great answer. All right, next interval. In very short intervals like 30 seconds, should I be looking at time at AP instead of exponentially weighted moving average when assessing time at 90%, VO2 max, etc.?
That's a good question too, because the modeling for VO2 is based on exponentially weighted moving average 30-second. Or 25 seconds.
25 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, 25 seconds. So yeah, I think that if you're looking at that chart, you don't want to change that, because a 30-second interval, it may not be enough time to tap into where you think it is based on the power number, right? Because there are VO2 kinetics involved. So I think that when you're running intervals that are 30 seconds and less, you're looking at you're not looking at VO2 so much unless you're into micro intervals with a really small recovery. In which case that exponentially weighted moving average 25 seconds starts to kick in and allows you to analyze it. But if you're doing 25-second, 30-second hill repeats with a 1 or 2 minute recovery, you're looking at, just look at the power numbers and relative to that left-hand side of your power duration curve. And it's not VO2 max training, so to speak.
All right, I said I was going to keep my mouth shut, but I'm not. In cycling, I would never, personally, my opinion, I don't use 30, so 30 on and 30 off, which this is being asked. I don't use it in cycling because the rest is too long and you actually break up those kinetics. I'll never rest more than 20. So I might do 40-20, I might do 30-20, or more like 30-15. Once you start resting over kind of the average time, like when you start getting rest over 20 seconds, you might say 25, the rest period is too long, in my opinion, and you're losing the advantage of the micro in cycling. I don't know how well that translates to running.
It translates 100%. It's physiology, basically. And I don't prescribe those type of workouts. Now, this is always a problem when people start talking about 30-second intervals or 200-meter repeats. What's this desired stimulus? Is your desired stimulus VO2 max, in which case you're doing really short recoveries, right? At a proper intensity. Again, it comes down to those work intensity, work duration, recovery intensity, recovery duration. If that's your target, VO2 max with micro intervals, you're going to have to manipulate those recoveries, duration and intensity to achieve what you want. But in running, 200-meter intervals might be with a minute or 2 minute recovery, but you're hitting intensities that are really working RWC, right? It's not, the desired stimulus is not VO2 max. The desired stimulus is that left-hand side of the power duration curve. And if you're doing micro intervals, yeah, you get a little bit over there, but not the same as if you lengthen the recovery and really hit it. And then you're exercise, you're doing a stimulus for that left-hand side of the power duration curve.
Excellent point. All right, next question. What is your preferred approach to quantifying the load with running? So your preferred approach towards quantifying training load in running?
My preferred approach is there, as I tried to demonstrate, and I was sort of running short on time, but I tried to demonstrate, my approach is multifactorial. I want to know, I understand chronic training load and acute training load. Those are very important for me. But, as I said, those are things that I don't look at week by week. I look at ramp rate. I'm looking at composition. I'm looking at how the intensity load is growing, or training impact score load is developing. So, yeah, I think the answer to that is there is no one thing with training load. There's no magic. Oh, my TSB is this, and that means I shouldn't work out today. No. If you're looking for one thing that's going to tell you exactly what to do on a given day in terms of load, forget about it. No, take that back. How you feel might be that one thing. But in terms of coaching, looking at data and looking at metrics, it's a combination of things. You got to synthesize from a bunch of different data points or metrics or charts, even triangulate to where you want, where your understanding is.
Excellent. All right, next question. I guess the MFTP derived from the power duration curve in WKO5 was designed initially for cycling. Is the power duration curve algorithm adapted to running with power? ? If not, do you think the MFTP value derived from run PDC is also adequate for running?
I think that MFTP, if the power duration curve is properly tested, that's a key thing. And pardon me for waving my finger. Power duration curve, if it's properly tested, MFTP is going to be pretty spot on. I've done a study which I haven't published where I looked at stride, CP testing, and MFTP. All right, stride's auto CP, I mean. And when you expose those models to the same data, same testing data, properly tested, those estimates are all really tight. There's no significant difference across those three different models, a monad model versus Stride's Golden Cheetah adaptive model versus WKO's model. There's no significant difference. They're all tightly bunched within about 1 or 2%, exposed to the same testing data. The variance is on the left-hand side, how that's modeled, and how FRC and our RWC and W prime, if you're using Golden Cheetah, Stride doesn't even report that. Those are modeled different, and it depends on how the model is leveraging the data. To answer your question specifically, WKO MFTP is going to be tight with other models for estimating FTP/CP if using the proper data.
Excellent answer. And you guys probably see me answer this almost once a day in the group. My model doesn't work. Did you test? No. Well, that's why your model doesn't work. It's like literally, it's a cut and paste that I do. The power duration curve was not meant to predict something, right? It wasn't designed to predict something. It was designed to be a more smooth estimate of your mean maximal power for the development of physiological metrics. It's a totally different purpose. All right, Steve, here you go. Kind of training related. And this is funny, I'm going to look forward to this answer. Kind of training related, but I haven't seen heart rate in any of your charts, I think. Do you use it as trend data, or do you use heart rate data?
No. I am in the camp that heart rate is redundant at best and misleading at worst. I think if one was using heart rate, it would be in things like efficiency index and something like that in base training. But in my slides, I said, you got to know your models. If you're using that metric, in running, if you're analyzing, say, a long run, a 2-hour long run, you're looking at heart rate drift or no heart rate drift, right? The run needs to be somewhat symmetrical because it's looking at first half, second half, in terms of grade and in terms of effort and in terms of temperature. If you're out for 3 hours and the temperature gets hotter and hotter, what happens to your heart rate? You may be holding ISO power, but your heart rate's going up and it looks like you have a dissociated heart rate power. Same thing if you do fast finishes, it throws that metric out. So yes, there are instances, no, I don't use it. Now, here's where I think the value of heart rate. HRV, resting heart rate, orthostatic heart rate, all of these things that are not during the training process, but after and before the training process. Those can be quite valuable, I think, along with other things like RPE, how the person feels, their sleep quality, their sleep hour, all of these things. And Tim knows this. Tim has a training load that actually tracks those various things. I think that's the value of heart rate. Not so much in a workout, but in between workouts.
Stephen, and in cycling, it's easier because of the higher efficiency and the more controlled and the less impact of form. Where running, that breakdown of fatigue, the impact on your running form fatigue is dramatically different than it has in cycling. But one thing you said that is absolutely true for me, I will use heart rate some, big picture stuff, EF, some things like that, but only really in base training. Once we get out of this very kind of controlled, steady state as the generalized principle, it just becomes too much of a variable and leads you astray more often than it helps you. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All right, next question is actually for me. Can you define user level variables? That's all the question I'm going to read because yes, that's what you're suggesting in your question is exactly the way we want to be able to do it. So the answer is yes, I understand. All right, Steve, here's an interesting one for you. What is Steve's favorite book on the shelf over his right shoulder? So you have a bunch of books behind you, top right. Which is your favorite book up there?
See, it's a trick question because you can't see the books that are right here on the table to the left of me, which are but up there, there's Buchheit and Larson's book on interval training. There is Mujica's book on distance running, which is outstanding. And then there is Training Racing with a Power Meter, which is, more cycling centric, but there's a lot to be learned there. So yeah, there's several books up there, but there's also these that are right over there.
Secret books. I love it. All right, we have two more questions coming for you. Can WKO work with structured planned workouts? And therefore, can VO2 and Dfrc analytics be shared on actual runs, be conducted on planned workouts? I can answer that one. No. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think is a question about dynamically monitoring those.
I think what the question's about, and it's our number one request in Training Peaks, not just WKO. You have a structured workout, right? And if you wanted to use eye levels and then overlay metrics and things like that, can you bring in the structured workout and do that? Like a lot of your charts, you were looking at your prescription, wasn't, in Training Peaks, yeah, you can put the nice little blue block behind your power and stuff like that. That you can't mix the two at this time. Structured workouts are not usable by like eye levels or your levels, your training intensity targets and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I understand the question now. Yeah, there's a lot of things that pop up into your head that would be really nice, but there's current limits, and maybe 10 years from now, who knows?
Yes. There might actually be a better way in the future. So less technical, but what one metric or chart in WKO you haven't been looking at until now, but you'd like to implement in your workflow down the road? So what's the one new thing you'd like to implement?
One new thing, it's actually in the views that I have. The left hand dashboard that's in that view. Glycolytic index is one that I really want to start looking at for running, and I thank Coley and others for their work on that. I want to see how that works running, and of course, in my context in the marathon, if it had a marathon runner, we want to see that go down as opposed to go up. If I had a 1,500 meter runner, maybe I want to see that go up. So that's the thing that to me is a new thing. It's evolving. I want to watch it and hopefully make use of it.
Yeah, it's a great answer and good metric. There's a lot to be, you said the right way to use it too. The number works well when you weigh it against other numbers, and then the blended impact on actual performance, what your desired goal is. So excellent answer.
I'm going to just dovetail one thing and go back to that training load question. We try not to interpret anything in a vacuum. You want to see how it relates to other aspects in the similar domain. So this training load, we want to not just look at one chart, we want to look at a bunch of charts. In this case, like Tim said, it's you try not to interpret one thing in a vacuum.
Yeah, and that's what, and when you create metrics and suddenly you get 4 or 5 of them, you're like, oh, now you see the picture, right? That's exactly what you're going for, because the human being is a complex system of mechanisms and systems and profiles and stuff like that. So it's a great answer. It's what makes Steve such a great coach. All right, Steve, last question. There's one or two other speed questions after that, just closing, but how do you monitor off-season / in-between racing training blocks, mainly looking at CTL ramp rate and/or ATL CTL ratio in order to enable enough rest recovery while minimizing fitness loss?
There are some times when I rather have all the niggles resolved, and I'll give up fitness, a lot of fitness to achieve that, knowing that the next thing we go into, we need a healthy athlete. So there's again, comes back to, you want to not just interpret things in a vacuum. I like to see how the athlete's feeling, making sure there's no injury. So these are not necessarily metric things, but I am watching ramp rate go negative and TSB go really positive. I don't get too worked up over those things. It's more about getting things resolved and then building back up. And the key is knowing that there's enough time going out there off screen that allows you to say, okay, I'm comfortable letting this go because I know I've got this much time. If it's a quick turnaround, then it's, yeah, we don't want to let the ramp rate get negative too long. We want to see that CTL start turning up and heading back up again. So yeah, it really depends on what's out here.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to wrap it up, even though there's a couple of last second questions, but I think in an hour 30 something in, you've more than done your duty. Steve, thank you so much for a great webinar, a great presentation, and getting to the questions. We'll get this recorded and posted up in the Facebook group here pretty quickly, probably within the next couple of hours. If you send us your presentation, and if you don't mind, we can drop it into a PDF and link it if people want it. If not, we totally understand. And any charts and whatever, I already see people in chat saying they're being requested. So I'm sure you're going to get that request for some charts.
I will put the charts in the WKO Power Users Facebook group. I will just put them in there so you can download them.
Awesome.
The views, actually. Yeah.
Great. Then we should have this up in about an hour. Awesome. Thanks again, Steve. We so appreciate it. What a great webinar. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
See you, everybody. Good night.